Hello, everybody. Shreya, I think you gave a good example by giving a smile to everyone. Everybody, please give me a smile. Listen, we are going through such tough times. There's a lot to cry about. Maybe we need to look at the small mercies and learn to smile at it. Listen, the very fact that you are all here attending this course is enough reason for me to smile. Be happy. Nobody forced you to do the course. Nobody deputed you. This course is not going to give you untold riches. Nobody is going to make so much of money out of palliative care as to buy a Mercedes. Your desire to help others made you come here. And I owe my hands to you. Thank you for doing this. I have an apology. There are this is quite a heterogeneous group. There are people who have been in palliative care for a long time. Many people. There are also people who are new. Understandably, I will have to be inclusive of the people who are new. So the seniors, the well-versed, please bear with me when I go to right down to the basics and talk about the basics of palliative care. I also see that there are a few medical doctors here. Raju, I hope they are not here because of any misunderstanding. There is a separate course for doctors where more of palliative medicine will be taught. As you can see, this is the foundation course in palliative care. By all means, go through this. But Raju, if somebody later, if they are here by mistake and later want to switch to the other one, you will let them, won't you?
Yes, sir. We will let them.
Okay, just give one more smile to Raju and she will do it. So we are going to do this one session on introduction to palliative care. Gayatri, I would like a favor from you. I'm on slideshow. I'm not monitoring the chat box now. I encourage people to put up questions on the chat box. Let us make this interactive. Whenever you have a comment or a question, put it up on the chat box. Gayatri, will you please screen them?
Yes,
And
yes,
if they
sure,
are to be
sir.
brought in the middle of the discussion, please let us do that. If not, we can, if they are not pertinent to what I am saying at the moment, we'll discuss them at the end. Will that be okay?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Palliative care. I'm going to talk also, start by talking a little bit about healthcare as a whole. There's not all that much difference. Raju, will you let me share the screen?
Yes, sir. You can share it.
Sorry. Sorry with that bit of confusion there. Let me bring it to the opening slide. Is there anybody from Andhra Pradesh here in this group? I don't remember hearing anybody mention Andhra Pradesh. This couple, about 4.5 years back, approached the court in a small town in Andhra Pradesh. This father and mother, poor villagers, appealed to the court, to the honorable court, please allow us to kill our child. This child at that time was 4.5 years old, had been living with cancer for 3 years from the age of 1.5. This poor couple borrowed money they did not have, and traveled through the country, traveled through many parts of now Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, seeking treatment, and Karnataka, hopping from place to place. The boy got a lot of treatments, rounds and rounds of chemotherapy, but never pain relief. According to them, it was 3 years of hell for the child and 3 years of hell for them. When the child was 4.5 years, they asked the court, "My child is suffering so much. Please allow us to end his life, so as to end him of his misery." Ladies and gentlemen, you are compassionate people, and that gives me the courage to ask you, how many are here, Raju? 40 plus?
40 now, sir.
Yeah. So, are you responsible for this child's suffering? Any one of you? Gayatri, are you responsible for the suffering of the child?
Yes, sir.
Oh my God. Gayatri, why do you think you are responsible?
Sir, somehow before coming to this particular condition, somehow the child's pain should definitely be reduced somehow. So everybody is responsible for this, I guess.
Gayatri, I think I agree with you. We live in a democracy. We are ruling ourselves. We elect the people who rule us. If we wanted, we could have been loud enough for the politicians to hear us, for the lawmakers to do the needful. And when we are living in a democracy, I don't think we can get away by just blaming somebody, run away. I agree with you, Gayatri. You and I and everybody here is responsible for this state of affairs. We are all responsible for more than 26,000 people in India who commit suicide every year for health-related reasons. 1/5 of all suicides in the country, according to the National Crime Records Bureau, 1/5 of all suicides are because of health-related suffering. Gayatri and I and you are responsible. I have seen many scars like this in my life. People attempting suicide. And they remind me, for these 26,000 people, for each one of them, if one person succeeded, only then they get into the statistics. People like him who try and fail are not getting into the statistics. For each one of them, how many must be trying and failing? And for each one of them who tries, how many would be living with the feeling that I wish I had the courage, or I wish I had the strength? Gayatri and I are responsible. You are responsible. Are you reading the screen? Is that a bit difficult to believe? Hey, people come from all over the world for treatment. Interestingly, I met even during the COVID times, I met a family living in USA, come here for dental treatments. Because anyway, they wanted a holiday in India, but it was such good quality and so inexpensive in our country. When I was attending a meeting somewhere, a lady from Uganda came up to me and said, "Are you are from India? Are you from Hyderabad?" Yes, no. Why? Oh, I have been to Hyderabad. I took my aunts for treatment there. Your hospitals are so good. But why is it that you do not treat pain? Even in my country, we treat pain. Why is it that my aunt had to go through the surgery with no pain relief at all? It was miserable, she said. I am not surprised, ladies and gentlemen. It is not going by the quality of healthcare that is given in some hospitals to a few people. Because Gayatri and I, when we go out into the rural areas, even in the affluent Kerala compared to other states, we such horrendous suffering. The inequity of healthcare that we see in our country is not matched by most countries, and which is why in the global burden of disease study of Lancet, where they put in specific indicators, we come behind Bangladesh, which is much poorer than us. I am not just mourning about it. We are going to change it, aren't we? Yes or no? We are going to change it. Every one of us has the ability to take one step forward, do something to change it. And we shouldn't underestimate ourselves. Everyone has the ability to take care of at least that person's and that person's pain, this person's and this person's starvation. And already, when you have fed one hungry stomach, when you have eased one pain, the world is a slightly better place. We all have the power. And let us do something about this. Particularly regarding end of life care. I heard the introductions, and some of you have worked in the best hospitals, the best corporate hospitals in our country. Some of you are working in the best hospital. Some of you are working in rural areas. I see, I heard a few people are from Emmanuel Hospital Association hospitals, which are by no means the richest hospitals, but they solve inequity in the country by reaching out into areas where the poor are not given treatment elsewhere. But collectively, we do one big fraud, one big error. We make one big error in our country. Dr. Sankha is a British oncologist of Bengali origin. I walked around with him in many corridors of Calcutta government offices and hospitals. He now works in Australia and makes money and sends it across to Calcutta for giving palliative care to people in our country. And he says, in India, the poor die in misery and neglect. The middle class die in misery of ignorance. The rich and die in misery on ventilators. No one gets a pain-free and dignified. You want to give it a thought? How many of you, all of us are going to die someday. Sorry, human mortality continues to be 100%. We will all die. Would you like to die like this? How many would choose intensive care unit as the place to die? Gayatri, is anybody responding by chat?
No, sir.
Then I'll wait for a minute or two to see how many of you would like a death in the intensive care unit.
So many have replied like nobody want to die in the ICU. Nobody will like to die like on ventilators. No, sir. Respectfully, no. Many
Friends,
have replied like nobody, sir.
friends, uh, I started medical practice at a time when Trivandrum Government Medical College Hospital did not even have one ventilator. Then ventilators came in the 70s. They were used to save lives that can be saved. People with flail chest after accidents, people after major cardiac surgery, 2 or 3 days of ventilation, people used to be saved. It was only in the 80s and more in the 1990s, only quarter of a century, that a new disease came in, the intensive care disease. Till then, intensive care was used for, why intensive care? What's the purpose of intensive care? Do you know? It is for minute-to-minute monitoring and minute-to-minute changes in the treatment. If this man's heart all of a sudden develops an arrhythmia, develops a problem, immediately it is picked up by the machines, so that at that point, within a minute, the doctors and nurses can act. If they don't, one organ failure will continue to harm the other organs. Therefore, intensive care can save lives miraculously. When life is salvageable. But ladies and gentlemen, someday I will die. You are all young, or vast majority of you are young. I can see it in front of me at my age. And I know what we will have another discussion on end of life care in detail, but this would not be the way I also want to go. Incarcerating every dying person in intensive care is assault and battery on the person. It's cruel, and therefore the failure to treat this man's pain and the incarceration of this person together put us among the worst 15 countries to die in. The Economist Intelligence Unit, which has studied 80 countries around the world, puts India as at the 67th place. You will notice that several countries, poor countries, including Zambia, Kenya, are all above us. We might as well accept it. There is a horrendous infliction of suffering in our country, which is not matched all over the world. In the UK and USA, they also put people on ventilators. But if treatment is considered futile, the majority are taken off ventilator and instead given palliative care. We do it in our country only when the patient can no longer pay. Oh, that's not everybody, I know. I'm looking on the bad side, but unfortunately, that's the rule rather than the exception. And there is something else happening in India, which is also not global. Oh, that increasing healthcare expenditure is global. But 55 millions, dear friends, more than 4% of our population pushed below poverty line by catastrophic health expenditure. That's not every country. In World Bank data, if you just go through World Bank website and look for catastrophic health expenditure, you will find that India and Bangladesh are among the worst 12 countries as far as catastrophic health expenditure is concerned. Remember, this means the next generation and the next generation is also affected. So it is in this context that I bring up palliative care. The fact that pain and suffering is not treated, The fact that there is so much of suffering that so many people commit suicide, the fact that we are among the worst in healthcare as a whole, in end of life care, all this makes us, and the catastrophic health expenditure gives you a tremendous opportunity to turn things around, and make a difference. Raju, you are ready to give this poll?
Yes, sir.
We bring in the concept of palliative care. I would request you to answer this question for me. Most appropriate answer. Every answer may be correct up to a point. What's the most appropriate answer? Palliative care focuses on pain and other symptoms. Is treatment of people with incurable diseases. Is healthcare for the poor and vulnerable. Focus on prevention and management of health-related suffering. As I said, every answer is correct. Which would be the most appropriate answer? Raju, is that the only one that we focus on? How about depression, anxiety? How about emotional disturbances? How about homelessness? How about poverty? We look after pain and other symptoms, but we also look after social, emotional, and spiritual issues. True, we do look after people with incurable diseases, but it is not only for people with incurable diseases. To the 4 people who chose this, let me tell you, think of me as tomorrow's patient. Suppose I have an incurable illness and I come to the hospital in pain. Don't you think my pain should be treated that time? It doesn't get treated today. So the doctors will do the X-ray, examination X-ray, then a CT scan, then a PET scan. The scans will go on and I will continue to be in pain. Sorry, that's not acceptable to me. Along with treatment of the disease, you need to treat my suffering. So while this is correct, this alone should not be permissible. We certainly provide free health care for the poor and vulnerable. Palliative care I think there was somebody from Medanta here. There the poor may not have access and that doctor may not be able to do it. But we do. We believe in equity of care. We believe everybody should have equal opportunity in getting care. So this is not only for them. So as the majority of people have said, quoting a recent Lancet Commission report, if hereafter you are asked what is palliative care, I hope you will say, it is prevention and management of health-related suffering, serious health-related suffering, which includes pain and other symptom management. It includes treatment of the incurable people and end-of-life care also. It is also equitable care for the poor, but whether poor or rich, whether curable or incurable, whether it is symptom or psychosocial suffering, palliative care would take care of any serious health-related suffering. Any comments there, Gayatri?
No, sir. No.
I was waiting for a few seconds to see if anybody has a question.
So somebody is asking what happened to that child.
I was planning to spare you the misery. Very sad story. Child's pain was not news. Child suffering was not news. When did it become news? It became news only when the court said, no, you cannot kill the child. Euthanasia is illegal in our country. The court said no. Then it became news. Purpose carried the news. It was very touching. And we tried to make inquiries. Where would the child be? It took us 2 days through the newspaper to find that the child was in Hyderabad. we work very closely with one of the best palliative care centers in the country, in the regional cancer center in Lakdi Kabul in Hyderabad. So we talked to our colleagues, and they went around and found that the child had actually been in a place that they could see from the hospital, another big corporate hospital. They could easily have referred the child to this place in walkable distance. It didn't happen. But by the time they made inquiries, that day, the child and family had got discharged. They went to Bangalore seeking further treatment. I bow my hands to that volunteer whose name I do not know, whom I have never seen, a volunteer in Hyderabad. Got the child registered in their institution in absentia, got a supply of morphine dispensed, and that person traveled overnight to Bengaluru to find the child. She had got information about which hospital the child was. They got to the hospital, and the child was in an ICU getting inappropriate treatment. The morphine stayed outside. The volunteer stayed outside. The father and mother stayed outside. The child died a day after his 5th birthday, alone in an ICU, deprived of one final kiss from the parents, deprived of the morphine that was waiting outside the door. The child died in pain inside the intensive care unit. I don't want to rub it in, ladies and gentlemen, but we are all responsible. This is the kind of thing that we are going to change. Vallabh Bhattacharya, I just call out your name because I see your name right in front of me. Satish ji, everybody together, we have to change this. This is horror.
We will, sir. We will.
We will. That's it. Sloga, you are sitting in New York. What time is it?
6 a.m.
You are so early in the morning. You are here because you sitting there feel the need to change things in India. Thank you for being here, and together we will.
Thank you, sir.
And that healthcare will not only come to the people who come to us in our hospitals. This was not the way it was 2 generations back. It was not the healthcare system that we see today, but whatever little it was, whether it was the Ayurvedic physician or the modern medicine doctor, they used to do home visits. Of course, the family had to bring a transport, and the typical sight was the family member carrying a bag and the doctor visiting the patient in the home. The Astana Declaration, Astana is the capital of Kazakhstan, where in October, the world nations got together, including India, and together, world nations came out with this declaration. Healthcare should reach people where they are, when they need it. Where they are, when they need it. I expect that there are a few of you who do it. People from Emmanuel Hospital Association, do you do home visits? At least in some Emmanuel Hospital Association or institutions, home visits are done.
We
I
have
don't
a
know whether.
proper,
Sorry?
sorry, sir, we have a proper plan. Like each and every unit is having, like each and every hospital under Emmanuel Hospital Association have their own plan, and according to the plan they visit. Like some of the hospitals they visit every day, some of the hospitals alternative days, some of the hospitals like once in a week.
And do you find it rewarding? We do.
Yeah,
When we
it's
visit
very
people,
rewarding.
it's very rewarding. We see people in their genuine nature, how they suffer, how they live, all this we see. And they welcome us so warmly, and they are so grateful for what we give to them. But this is not a favor that Emmanuel Hospital Association is doing to people. This is not a favor that Valley India is doing to people. This is their right. This is the way it should be. India has signed this declaration that it is our duty. Where they are, when they need it. We are not always able to guide them across to them whenever they need it, but that's what we want to do. Gayatri, Shriya, it may not happen in my lifetime, or maybe it will. Maybe you will make it happen in my lifetime. Someday, we should be offering 24-hour helpline, 24-hour home visit service. When somebody is dying and they desperately seek our help, we say call an ambulance and come over. We should be going across to them. We can't do it today. We don't have enough muscle to do that, but someday we will. And ladies and gentlemen, this group has medical doctors, this group has psychologists, this group has medical social workers, this group has human beings who may not fit into these categories, just human beings. Healthcare for all can be true healthcare only when it is quick on. If we were not engaging the community, we would not reach most of the patients whom we reach today. Volunteers from the community working with us make wonders happen. The Astana Declaration actually says that their community participation is not enough. They say give control over the healthcare system to the community, at least in part. Get them in control. It's already happening in Kerala to a small extent. Suya, do you know? Because Kerala has this rather, okay, it's not perfect, but functional local self-government institution system. Every panchayat has its own healthcare. The panchayat actually owns the primary health center there. And they have several decision-making powers. Of course, the medical system will hold much of the power with them, but still. And therefore, our healthcare will not stop short at giving medicines. If they are hungry, we will give food kits. If the children drop out of school, we will make sure that the children get educated. If the roof is leaking, I had that photograph. I wish I had showed it. I could show it today. I think two of our social workers and two of our volunteers traveled together on Sunday, I remember, just as the monsoon was about to start, with a huge roll of canvas to tie it over the roof of a thatched roof of a poor patient, because they would have been living in rain. Is that healthcare? Of course, it's healthcare. Thank you, Ajay. Ajay is nodding. Absolutely. Without that, healthcare is meaningless. Just going there and dishing out tablets when the roof is leaking and the family is in the rain holding umbrellas within their homes. That would be a mockery of healthcare. This is how the World Health Organization has defined healthcare. It is not only absence of disease or infirmity. It is physical, social, and mental well-being. Not only the absence of disease, physical, social, and mental well-being. Hey, there are a few medical doctors here. Now, my medical education was half a century back. Was this what you studied? Were you taught how to assess and treat social well-being? I know you were not taught that. I was not taught it half a century back, and you were not taught this. But that's because it's convenient for us to ignore what true healthcare is. It is easier for us to order MRI scans and treat diseases. That is convenient. It's not so convenient to hold an umbrella and go out in the rain and see patients.
Excuse me, sir. There is a question in the chat box by Mr. Mohan Kumar. Why in Indian system of medicine, doctors are excluded from practicing palliative care in India?
Dr. Mohan Kumar, Mr. Mohan Kumar or Dr. Mohan Kumar, I don't know. Thank you. That's a big question. Two parts to my answer. One, it was a global phenomenon. Medicine becoming more and more invaded by technology and going away from human beings. It happened globally. In India, it just turned out to be much more practiced than globally. That's part of it. Two, in India, somewhere around 70% of healthcare is on the corporate side. If healthcare was more on the public side, maybe things would have been better. I do not want to go into why of that, but we learned medicine from the West. When we brought in Western medicine, we failed to continue to include whatever was good in our system, like doing home visits. It did not happen. But Mohan Kumar, let us look on the bright side. From 2019, medical curriculum includes palliative care. It will be a quarter of a century before the teachers learn it and teach it, but officially it's in the curriculum. I don't know if you know this. The new health policy of 2017 includes palliative care. Currently, the national government of India is doing an education program. The national level trainers have already been trained, state level trainers, local trainers. 150,000 family and wellness centers are going to include some palliative care. Mohan Kumar, a beginning has been made. Why is a matter of sad historical change? But Mohan Kumar, in our country, usually change is slow. Our management, our general social interactions are believed to be rather slow. We don't change very fast. Unless we all push together, the change will be abysmally low. Even if we do not see enough change in my lifetime, Mohan Kumar, best wishes, at least in your lifetime, I hope you will see healthcare becoming more compassionate and treat a lot more of suffering. Mr. Mohan Kumar, have I answered your question?
Yes, sir. He has replied as yes.
Thank you. So, this is what we want to do. We are not only talking about palliative care, we are talking about healthcare. As I said, India's national health policy includes palliative care. This is to be practiced in all healthcare. But we have chosen to make a beginning with palliative care. We have to begin somewhere. When one is living with a life-limiting or life-threatening illness, or one is aware of approaching death, it can cause unique stresses and challenges. In this group of 45 people, there must be at least 15 people who have gone through an experience of serious illness or a death in your own family. And you will know what I'm talking about. The stresses are numerous, psychological and social. Social means related to relationships within the family, with the community, and economic. So, just as in the case of the child and parents that I talked about in the beginning, understanding the factors related to the patient's quality of life is essential to provide appropriate care. The stethoscope is not enough. Stethoscope is important. Diagnosis is important. Treatment of disease is important. But along with that, quality of life is important in all healthcare. And in palliative care, that's what we try to do. But remember, we are trying to integrate palliative care into healthcare so that eventually the change will happen. The unique stressors and factors that affect quality of life would be falling into these various domains. For that child, what could the physical issues be? One is pain. What else could it be? Anybody? A child with advanced cancer, 4.5 to 5 years old, apart from pain, what could be the elements of the child suffering?
Sir, it would be physical, definitely psychological and social.
Wait. Who is answering this?
Sir, Tanvi.
Tanvi, in
Yeah.
physical domain, apart
Yeah.
from pain, what else could be the child suffering?
First of all, the child is totally dependent on the parents, so definitely moving around would be a challenging task.
Yes.
Feeding and eating would be a physical challenge.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And then I moved to the psychological challenge. Obviously, this stressors which would be coming along in his growing up years, which would be definitely challenging to his overall growth and development in the very early years.
What would the child's psyche be when torn away from the parents, taken into a room, and a bone marrow aspiration is done without anesthesia? That's what happens in our country.
Yeah. So that would bring along a lot of stressors, both the physical pain that the child is enduring and also the emotional pain with what the child is going through, being away from the parent, being into that particular environment of a ICU or probably in the surgery room.
Tanvi,
Yes, sir.
I have a doubt.
Yes, sir.
Child psychological problems. I'm not talking about the parents, the child psychological problems. Do you think more would have been because the disease, or do you think more would have been because the treatment, our healthcare system?
Sir, according to me, it would be because of the disease what the child is going through, and definitely one part would be the contributory factor about how the treatment has been given to the child. So in our healthcare system, we usually don't prepare the young children that what the suffering would be coming along with the treatment what they're receiving.
And me, as a child, when you fell and hurt your knee, do you remember running to your mom or dad, hugging them and crying?
Yeah.
The very fundamental reaction of a child is for the parents' hug. And we denied that to the child. Okay. I will, when we come to the socio-economic, we'll talk about the spiritual aspect also. Rather than asking you a question, I'll request Raju to show a video. It's a 5-minute clip taken from a TEDx talk by my colleague, Smriti Rana, who is a psychologist and director of programs at Palliative India. And she was giving this TEDx talk, and I stole a small clip out of it.
In palliative care, we have this notion of total pain, pain that takes into account the life circumstances of the patient that contribute to his or her experience of suffering. I came across that concept quite early in my life, and I mean, in my career, and I thought I understood it, theoretically at least. And then one day, the home care team that I was a part of was called in to see this fisherman in one of the outlying villages of Trivandrum. We parked our van some 400 meters away, made our way down this narrow, undulating path. We could hear this man's screams well before we got to his house. And on approaching the house, we were assaulted by this stench, which made me gag. And when we entered his home, we were met by this helpless young woman, and behind her on the bed, a man in his 40s, who was the source of the screams. He had a myriad problems and a feeding tube. And on closer examination, we found that he also had a bowel obstruction that was not allowing him to pass what his wife was so diligently feeding him because she didn't know what else to do to look after him. And as a result, he was regurgitating his own waste. It was awful. Anyway, he was cleaned up, analgesics and other medication were administered, but no matter what we did, his pain would not fall below 6 on the pain scale, which is essentially a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, where we ask people to score their subjective pain. So finally, this benevolent and wise doctor that I have the absolute privilege of calling my mentor, he took this man's hand in his own, and he asked him, he said, "What's your biggest concern right now? What is bothering you?" What an odd question, I thought. I mean, the pain, the humiliation, the despair, and just the misery of everything that he was experiencing. I mean, the answer was glaringly obvious to me. The man didn't say anything for a long time, and I started to get fidgety. The silence was starting to get awkward and strained, to me at least. But the good doctor, he held steadfast. And after about 6 long minutes, and I know this because I was timing it, this man very softly said, "All I wanted was for my children not to be fishermen. And now they're going to be just that." He knew he was dying, and he knew that his wife would not be able to support the children on her own, and this one fact was causing him far more agony than anything else that he was going through. So one of the things we strive to do in our program is to undertake the educational needs of children from disease-ravaged families that can no longer afford to send them to school. But this process takes about a week from when the child has been identified. In this case, however, we sped up the processes. Donors were found, pledges were made, documents were signed, all to see these 2 children, aged 8 and 10, through to college. We returned to the fisherman's house the next morning, and he was asked what his pain was. Still 6, he said. He was then shown the documents, and he was told, "It is done. Your children will not be fishermen." The transformation on that man's face was magical. And once he had digested that information, he was very gently asked one more time, "What is your pain now?" 1. He died 3 days later, pain-free. And that, my friends, is total pain. And that was when I truly learned my first lesson in being still and allowing.
Founder of the modern hospice movement and palliative care movement, Dr. Dame Cicely Saunders, who first talked about this concept of total pain that Smriti was talking about. Total pain is the conglomeration of all the physical and psychological problems that Tanvi was talking about, the socio-economic problems that Smriti was talking about, and the spiritual issues that we still haven't talked about. The man's feeling, what kind of life was mine? I couldn't even be fair to my children. I'm destroying their lives. That is a spiritual agony. And if he asks, what kind of God is this that does this to me? That is spiritual pain. So this, as Smriti has explained, is total pain. I think before I continue with this, I'll wait a minute for any questions or comments.
Sir, if I am permitted, I would
Please.
like to, this is Mudre from Mysore. 2 years back, we had a patient in our inpatient facility, a man of about 75, 76 years. His oxygen level was coming down, and our doctors was telling probably by this evening, he'll be exiting from this world. Our nurses prodded a little bit and tried to find out about his relatives. He was in a lot of agony. It appeared to be that there was a lot of load on his chest. And our nurses found out then later that his son, daughter-in-law, and child, they have not visited him. And son has not spoken for the last 9 years. And he stays in the first floor. Then our people, they coaxed the son, brought him to the center along with the child. And later, there was a tsunami of emotions coming out. He cried very, very loudly. And the next 3 days, it was magical. When we were thinking that he would be exiting by the same evening, he was very comfortable for the next 3 days, happily played with the grandchild. And the third day, he peacefully exited from the world. It was amazing to see that the way the oxygen level went up and the smiles in all the faces. It was wonderful. It was so rewarding for us.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you for sharing that great story. Very precious. And as you can see, it is not as if all of that fisherman suffering was psychological. Certainly, there was a major emotional component, so physical component in it. The rule is not only to look at the psychological problem, also look at them all together. It is one human being. Sorry, who was it who shared the story?
This is Mudre, Ramakrishna Mudre
Mr.
from Mysore.
Oh, thank you, Ramakrishna ji. Good to meet you again. Thank you for
Thank you,
sharing
sir.
that story. All this, your initial treatment would have treated a physical component of the pain, because if somebody is doubled up in physical pain, they are in no mood to talk, to make peace. So all this is equally important. None of this is more important than the other. The sociologists here and many counselors would be familiar with this. One of the things that we all have to understand, that human beings are different. Mr. Mudre told us a story. Not every son would react like that. Majority would. Not every father would react like that. The same person may not react to everything in the same way every time. And you all know this from your own life. When you have got problems, when you have come upon bad news, you lose your mobile, you lose a credit card, even something comparatively trivial like that, you go through all this. What did you do when you lost your wallet? You searched this pocket, and again, and here, and then looked around and searched in your spouse's bag. You deny, this cannot be true. This cannot be happening to me. The only problem is, some people get stuck there. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the pioneer. I think she died in 2005, an American psychiatrist who came up with this sequence. Elizabeth herself would say that it doesn't always happen in this sequence. Who has read the recent book by Paul Kalanithi, When Breath Becomes Air?
I have, sir.
Who was that?
Rohini Singh.
Huh?
Rohini, sir.
Rohini?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what Paul Kalanithi wrote about this? Paul Kalanithi, by the way, was a neurosurgeon. who at the age of 41, I think, he had just got a consultant in neurosurgery posting, and at that time was diagnosed with cancer. He, in the next 1 year of his life, he wrote the book, When Breath Becomes Air. Now the air that I am taking is breath. When I am dead, it becomes just air. When breath becomes air. Rohini, do you remember what Paul Kalanithi said about these stages of grief? Maybe you don't. So okay.
Right, so I remember him being in denial and not getting the test done because he was so scared that if something happens, he was afraid to acknowledge that reality. And he took a lot of time, which actually worsened his condition further because he was just not ready to face that reality. I don't particularly remember what he said about the 5 stages of grief.
Rohini,
Yes, sir.
he said, you are right, absolutely. Denial did give him a problem. But he said, I went through all the stages of grief in reverse order.
Right,
Initially, he was in acceptance, no problem, okay, cancer.
right.
And then he went through each of these in the reverse sequence, ending up in denial.
Yes, sir.
What Elizabeth Kubler-Ross herself said, and what Paul Kalanithi shows, that this is not necessarily the same sequence. Denial, this cannot be happening to me. The doctors have made a mistake. Maybe it is somebody else's report. Did you check the name and age and the number? Then comes anger. As I said, some people get stuck in denial. This is not true. This is not right. I don't have cancer. Or I have cancer, but I am going to get cured. The doctors say cure is not possible, but I will get cured. Anger. When you have lost something significant, including your wallet, you are angry. You find fault with your son or daughter or wife or husband. You always misplace things, and that's why I lost this. The anger comes out against people around you who are safe. Listen, if you are feeling very angry about a bad situation, your anger is unlikely to be shown to the policeman on the corner. Your anger is unlikely to come out at your boss who has to write your annual confidential report. Your anger is likely to come out at people who are vulnerable, like your children, your family. The problem is, in anger, they may say things, and we may say things, sometimes which cannot be taken back. It causes lasting damage in relationships. It very much depends on the temperament of the person. Some people, just as I said, some people go through denial forever. Some people continue in anger, and it may subside and go up and subside and go up. It depends on the person. And many people go into bargaining. Does anybody want to say what bargaining is as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross described it?
So, Rohini here again.
Yes, Rohini.
My mother was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017. And after her death in 2018, I have gone through these stages, but she also went through all these stages. And I remember there was a certain stage where she was in her last few months. She was admitted at the hospital. And there was one day out after very many days that she felt better. And the first thing she asked me was, will this give me a few more months? Will I be able to live enough to see a daughter married? Will I get, how much can this medicine affect my survival? And though bargaining was not a specific stage in her set of situations, but it was in moments where she got hope, she started bargaining. So that was my experience with her grief.
Rohini, thank you. When we are bargaining, you bargain with God. God, I will light 100 candles. I will do this offering at the temple. Please cure me. You go from doctor to doctor, from system to system. Allopathy to Ayurveda to homeopathy and back to allopathy, back to Unani, goes on. Depression. Depression in some people, it's a stage of feeling sad, but in some people can go on to the stage of a disease. And finally, acceptance. Okay, so what? If this is the situation, let us see what we can do about it. Of the 5 stages, as Elizabeth herself said, this is not all. There are many other emotions. Guilt, not infrequent at all. Intense guilt. But of these, which do you think is the healthiest?
Acceptance.
Thank you. Acceptance is the most peaceful and healthiest reaction. And what you and I will do together is to help the patients to come there. We cannot drag them here, not come to make them to come to acceptance now, this instant. We let it go slow. These are some of the things that we'll talk about in our course. How we will try to help people to get here. And that's when you make a rational decision. Okay, so doctors tell me that I may not have more than 3 months. But how do you know? It can be all of a sudden also. I must write my will. I must prepare my advance directive. One thing I want to do is to call my brother. I needlessly quarreled with him 3 years back. I want to make peace. I want to tell my wife how much I love her. These are all important things in the agenda. And till you are in acceptance, you are unable to fulfill all this. This will give you some peace. Okay, short of this, what else? The second best. Let us say, can anybody pick a second best? Oh, tough. Choosing between many evils is tough.
Denial, sir. Denial first.
Sir, thank you. Absolutely. I'm not saying that denial is good, but people in denial generally do well till the end. Till the last few days, they keep on denying. I'll always remember one of my patients with hepatic carcinoma who went on exploring here and there and secretly corresponding with hepatologists, trying to get a transplantation. And 2 days before he died, Sriya, it was in the previous place in Narumana Hospital, he actually went out to a restaurant and had a biryani with his wife just 2 days before he died. But last few hours or days would be better. Anger and depression are the most damaging. Both are destroy oneself and destroy others. Bargaining may be somewhere in between. Anger and depression destroy relationships and kills oneself emotionally and spiritually. So this is why we have the difficult task of working with people, helping people and their families to go through the stages of grief. I'll repeat, you can't drag somebody away, physically lift him away, come away from anger, come sit here in acceptance. You can't do that. They will do it at their own pace. You can travel with them, guide them, ease them, answer their questions, and walk with them. And you don't need a degree in medicine or psychology or anything. to be a good human being. Yes.
Excuse me, sir. In between, Miss Nilya that has mentioned about the sixth stage meaning. So she
What
says
meaning?
that
Meaning. Okay. We'll come to meaning. I'm not sure that we want to call it a sixth stage, but in addition to whatever Kubler-Ross said, here are other feelings: loneliness, guilt. Guilt is very common. Whatever you do, you feel guilty. Fear, absolute fear, terror, helplessness. And about meaning, we'll come to that. In social issues, already it was mentioned by Mr. Mudre about the man who had quarreled with his son and ensuring rebuilding connections. So precious to remove the guilt, give them peace, and treat the emotional isolation. Remember, every person with a serious illness is some degree of loneliness. Because as Jacqueline Johnson said, the disease is isolating. She is talking about cancer. And the isolation can hurt far more than the pain. Suddenly you, the person with the disease, is on one side of a wall and everybody else is on the other side, the normal side. Only I will know what my suffering is. Every time I'm not feeling appetite. Yohini, you must be familiar with this, having gone through the journey of your mother. She is not feeling hungry.
Yes,
Loving people go and force food on her. Eat some more, eat some more. The person feels lonely. Nobody understands me. Okay. We will come to a few things, but let me go on to that thing, that meaning of life that was brought up. Listen, if my life is meaningless, I don't want to live. There's no point. And that's many people, when they are ill, at some point say, what's the point? I might as well be dead. I'm now treating one of my teachers. And he, day before yesterday, said this. I wish it were quickly over. There's no point. I'm not going into the details of meaning. Meaning of life, making life meaningful, giving hope, treating hopelessness is at the essence of spiritual care. Spiritual care is not about chants and praying for the person. Spiritual care is certainly not forcing God down somebody's throat. It's about building connections, ensuring connections, and instilling meaning in life, making life meaningful. There is a list. I'm not going through all this. These things will be brought up to you one by one. At least it will be shared with you with the PowerPoint. These are all things that we need to do. Not only we were talking mostly about psychosocial problems, but social issues. There are all these government schemes. Do they know what? How do they know what to apply for? Gayatri will know. Gayatri should know. Will help them to apply. Prepare the application and get their signature and do the need. The roof that was repaired. The training, the paraplegic man being trained to do something and make a living. All these are essential psychosocial interventions. So if all this is palliative care, you please answer my question with a poll. Please go through the answers and find the most appropriate answer. Raju? Longer responsible to curative treatment. But then they found that the person with cancer has to go through 9 months of treatment with no relief for the pain, no relief for the breathlessness. And eventually the doctor certifies that he is not responding to curative treatment, only then he is eligible for palliative care. As a matter of fact, in a regional cancer center that I personally know, the oncologist had to certify a line. This person has no avenues for cancer-specific treatment left. Only then palliative care was allowed to see them. That's unfair. Think of me as a patient. Even before the diagnosis, I may be in pain. Don't I deserve pain management? But don't am I not likely to be in intense fear and suffering when somebody tells me I have cancer? So let us go with the first one. From the time of diagnosis, the current definition of palliative care, that is rewritten definition from 2002, has this wording. As you will see on another day. So the answer is the first one. The second one is was right, at one time considered right, but is unfair and unjust. Thank you for participating in the poll. The answer is, as soon as the suffering starts, if that option was there, that would have been the right thing. And that means that palliative care and health and disease treatment have to go hand in hand together. And before I end, I want to bring up this point also, that today the microscopic nuclear families are getting far removed from the medical system, which is getting bigger and bigger. And the so-called concept of social capital, the sense of goodness in the community volunteers, community getting together form the meso element of the community. Compassionate communities are developing in many parts of the world, UK, Australia, Canada. They bring in community participation in healthcare and connect the micro element with the macro element. And every one of you is part of this meso element. We are going to build that connection. And as far as possible, we should reach people where they are, when they need us. Like home visit to this woman who would have never seen a doctor if we had not gone there. And let us not forget children who are likely to drop out of school when there is an illness in the family. And if we are to do all that, everybody has to pull together. Volunteers, social workers, nurses, doctors, physiotherapists, counselors. Who is the most important? Yes, if you think from my point of view as a patient tomorrow, the most important person in the team is who is the person who is capable of doing the most benefit for me. When I am rolled up in pain, it may be the doctor. When I am sleepless at night and getting sobbing, it may be the nurse. When I am homeless, it may be the social worker finding me a roof over my head. When I am thinking nobody cares for me, it may be the volunteer coming and helping me. Every point of time, the person who is going to do the most for the patient has to be the most important team. Otherwise, no one is superior to the other. That doesn't mean that there's no commander for the team. There has to be a leader. Otherwise, it will be chaotic. Every team needs a leader, but that can change from time to time. But being a leader is not necessarily the most important person in the team. And therefore, we all need to be advocates. And this is from Arundhati Roy, who says, there is no such thing as voiceless people. People whose voice is not heard are deliberately silenced or preferably unheard. You choose not to hear them. And each one of us is going to be an advocate, speaking on behalf of a person and his family. One thing that is common to this group is that we are all going to be advocates for the patient. We will write in newspapers, we will do television shows whenever you know somebody who will do it, and we will participate in awareness programs. All this is our duty. I have, we still have a few minutes more. Question time, Gayatri.
Okay, now the floor is open for all to share your experiences, to ask any doubts. So please utilize this chance.
Yeah, this is Mudrai. I always get very, very curious about the medical education system. Is it not very much mystified? Can it not be more simple so that we all can understand? We always hold the doctors at a very highest pedestal, that they are the people who deliver good health. But on the contrary, now my recent experience, it appears to me that the health has to be owned by the community. It has to be owned by each individual in the community. Now, coming to that, can there be more simpler definition for medical practice?
Mr. Mudre, when instead of saying lung cancer, I say squamous cell carcinoma bronchus, I am you use the word mystification. You don't understand. And you are at my mercy now. When you don't understand, you are at my mercy. There is a power imbalance. I know the Latin terms, so I hold the power. And whenever there is a power, there is a tendency to abuse it. I wish I may not live the time to see the time when that becomes a reality, Mr. Mudre. But we are arguing for participation of the community, which means some of the medicine will become demystified. I hope that time will come. But it is not convenient for the medical system. It's convenient for us in the power balance to make it mysterious. Sunita, yes, we suffer emotionally. Sunita is asking, sometimes we become emotionally weak when we see the patient suffering. How do we handle? I'm not going to answer that question because you are going to have specific one session on this. There will be a session on self-care, right, Raju? Self-care.
Yes, sir, we do have.
So we will, because that cannot be answered in one sentence. But 2 sentences I will still say, you will have a whole session. Sunita,
Okay, sir.
you and I need to realize that we are only human beings. We cannot solve all problems. At some point of time when I go home and I'm worried about our Nisha, who is in intense pain despite everything that I did, I tell myself, Raju, you are only a human being. You have done your best. That's all you can do. You cannot solve all problems. And secondly, I will share my feelings with whoever I find before me. Gayatri or Raju or whoever is there. I share it with them. With the sharing within the team, Sunita is the part of the answer, but you will have more opportunity to talk about it. Oh my God, I overran time. Raju, I'm sorry. So there is hardly any time for discussion now. But this is only the introduction. Everything that I said here is going to be described in detail later on another sessions.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I'm Pallav Bhattacharya. I have a question, sir. Often in my doctoral research, I'm being raised with this question, like how is human resources management has got a direct relevance to palliative care?
Pallav.
Sir.
Palliative care in India is 45 years old. We are they are close to where we were. We have not made, even today only 2% of our population has access to palliative care. Why? Because we did not,
इन्होंने स्टोरी से एक स्टोरी बताई, एक फोटो दिखाई.
We did not put systems in place. Their management was amateurish. Human resources management is amateurish. All systems are amateurish. That's the problem. Pallav, systems have to be brought in. Efficiency has to be brought in without breaking the heart of palliative care. There need to be the right combination of the head and the heart. Today it's all heart, not enough brain there. But if it's all brain and only corporate management, you lose the heart. That will be a tragedy too. The balance between the heart and the head. Systems and humanity is what we need. Well, can I take
Thank you,
1
sir.
minute more, Gayatri and Raju?
Yes, sir.
Sloga, you have from New York, you have certainly sat through many of our programs. Is there some question or comment that is burning in your mind right at the moment?
I think this is more of an observation. My background is in, I've been trained as a scientist, and it's always really interesting to see how there's usually never a scientist in any of these discussions. And there's many reasons for it. I think one of them is the way, scientists communicate with other people as well, in jargon, in scientific terms. Whereas the purpose of all science is to alleviate suffering. And it's really interesting to see how there's usually never, a scientist in any of these discussions. But that's more of an observation.
Thank you, Sloga. I had never thought of that. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm over at times. Raju's eyes are now starting to burn. She hates it when we do not go by time.